The 2026 election in Assam gave voters a really stark and frankly pretty puzzling choice. On one hand, you had this story of incredible development and economic progress, but on the other, a campaign that seemed built on deep, deliberate social division. So how did these two powerful, competing narratives collide at the ballot box? Let's get into it.
To really get the intensity of this election, you just have to look at this number. We're talking about a historic 85.65% voter turnout. People literally braved rain and bad weather to make their voices heard. And, a turnout that high? Well, it tells you one thing for sure. The stakes felt incredibly high and incredibly personal for just about everyone.
So, what was it? What was the force that pulled so many people out to the polls? Well, the answer seems to be a tale of two very different Assams. Each one had a powerful story that was pulling voters in completely opposite directions. Let's start with the first story.
Okay, first up, the story of development. The incumbent government pretty much built its entire case on a platform of progress. The core of their argument was simple. Under our leadership, life in Assam has gotten tangibly, measurably better.
And they had numbers to back it up. I mean, look at this. According to government figures, Assam's economy, its gross state domestic product, grew by a whopping 45% in just 5 years. Now, to put that in perspective, it blew past the national average of 29%. That is a seriously powerful headline to take to your voters.
And they didn't just keep it at the big state-level numbers. They made it personal. The government reported a 54% increase in per capita income in only 4 years. So the message was really clear. It's not just that the state's economy is growing, it's that your wallet is too. And beyond those big economic numbers, there was this story of a massive welfare boom. The government claimed to have delivered over 100,000 government jobs, backed nearly 100,000 entrepreneurs, and provided a real safety net for millions of families, everything from food security to cashless medical care. I mean, these are policies that you feel in your day-to-day life.
And this narrative wasn't just about what's happening now. A huge investment by the Tata Group to build India's very first indigenous semiconductor facility was held up as proof of a forward-looking vision for Assam's entire economic future.
But, and this is a big but, running completely parallel to that story of progress was a much darker, much more controversial narrative. This was a story of polarization and really targeted rhetoric.
Just take this direct quote from the chief minister reportedly said in the state assembly. Now, the term Mia, which was historically used for Bengali-speaking Muslims, has been increasingly weaponized as a slur. The key thing to understand here is that this isn't some subtle dog whistle. It's an open, public declaration of taking sides against one specific community.
And in this quote, the strategy is just laid bare. This statement suggests a deliberate effort to create what's called a mahal, an atmosphere, that is so hostile people feel they have no choice but to leave on their own. It's a pretty stunning admission of intent.
And this isn't just talk. It has a real human cost. You just have to look at the story of someone like Noor Muhammad. He had documents, a home, a life. But during these eviction drives, he and others were labeled as foreign Bangladeshis. They lost their homes, and then, to make it all so much worse, they discovered their names had just vanished from the voter rolls.
This policy seems to take the division even a step further. Under this rule, any sale of land between a Hindu and a Muslim now requires the personal sign-off of the chief minister himself. Critics just slammed it, calling it blatant, unconstitutional discrimination written directly into state policy.
The rhetoric became so pronounced that it actually ended up in court. The Guwahati High Court, while hearing petitions against the chief minister, used this specific legal term, fissiparous tendency, to describe his statements. That's a formal way of saying this kind of language has the potential to literally fracture, to tear society apart.
So you've got these two huge competing narratives as the backdrop. How was the election itself actually fought? Well, the tactics used were aggressive. They were modern. And according to at least one report, they crossed several new lines in Indian politics.
And one of the key weapons in this election's arsenal was the deepfake. Now, you've probably heard the term, but a deepfake is basically a sophisticated AI-powered digital forgery. It can make it look like someone said or did something they never actually did. And in this election, it was apparently used on an unprecedented scale.
And look, what happened in Assam wasn't just a couple of rogue memes floating around. A detailed report described it as the very first industrialized AI disinformation campaign in an Indian state election. That word industrialized implies scale, coordination, and a systematic effort to mislead voters.
So let's walk through 5 of the most controversial tactics that really came to define this campaign. We're going to start with the AI deepfakes,
Then look at how beef was weaponized, the use of these unverified Pakistan link allegations, direct legal threats, and finally, claims of systematic manipulation of voter rolls.
The targeting was incredibly specific and personal. 31 confirmed deepfakes went after the opposition's chief ministerial candidate, Gaurav Gogoi, trying to paint him as some kind of enemy of the state. Even more disturbingly, 6 AI videos targeted his wife, a private citizen, in fabricated sexually explicit scenes. And these weren't just random posts. They were allegedly spread through official party and government accounts. But the controversies went way beyond AI. You had a candidate's Hindu identity being questioned because of what her mother ate. The chief minister publicly threatened opponents with life imprisonment, a statement many saw as straight-up intimidation. And behind the scenes, critics were alleging that nearly 250,000 names, mostly belonging to Muslims, were systematically wiped from the voter rolls.
So all of this raises a huge question of accountability. A monitoring report claimed that despite 119 documented violations of the Elections Code of Conduct, the Election Commission took no enforcement action. The allegation is that the referees were just silent on the sidelines.
So why are we focusing so much on one state election? Why does it matter on a national scale? Well, because many observers believe what happened in Assam isn't just about Assam. They see it as a laboratory, a testing ground for a new kind of politics.
This quote from a monitoring report really makes that fear explicit. It calls Assam a laboratory and warns that the playbook used there, the AI disinformation, the voter exclusion, the targeting of communities, is being prepared for what it calls the intended market of the rest of India.
And this, really, is what it all boils down to. You know, political rivalry is normal. It's even healthy for a democracy. But the real concern that critics are raising is what happens when that rivalry turns into outright hostility, when the goal isn't just to win an election, but to actually fragment society in the process.
Which leaves all of us with this final, really difficult question. The election in Assam offered voters this incredibly complex choice between tangible development on one side and deeply divisive politics on the other. So when progress and polarization are offered as a package deal, how does a democracy choose? It forces us to ask what we value most and what price we're ultimately willing to pay.